Hello everyone, it's Mariners Fanatic, and today I'll be doing an end of season review. This video is very late in coming out. I started a new job and did not have time to record or make videos, so sorry about the delay for anybody who does listen to this, as this video should have been done a month ago, right after the World Series. But getting to it now, and so if you are here for the Mariners review, that'll be the first part of the video, and the second part of the video will be kind of reviewing my preseason predictions and my tier list. I'll put the timestamp for the whole MLB tier list prediction in the description of this video, so if you want to skip ahead to check out what I thought of your favorite team, then go ahead and do that. But the first part of this video is going to be entirely about the Mariners. So with that said, I was impressed by what the Mariners were able to do this year with the young talent they had on their team, as well as the lack of pitching in the bullpen. The rotation was solid, and I'll get to that in the video, but I was very pleased with the progression of the team overall this season. Even in the shortened season, it was still a good experience for a lot of players to get on the field and show what they could do. So starting off, I want to point a couple things out. The Mariners were only shut out one time in 60 games, and that was against the Colorado Rockies. I believe German Marquez was pitching, and we lost 5-0. That was when the Rockies were hot and they were playing really well early in the season. But so that stat's important because it shows that, there were times where our offense definitely struggled, but overall we were competitive and focused on scoring and winning games throughout the whole season, only being able to get shut out one time. I know it's in 60 games, but that's still a great accomplishment. There is the ability to score runs. When the Mariners scored 4 runs, they were 24-8. When they did not, they were 3-25. So we lost low scoring games and we won games in which we scored more than 4 runs. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry if you look at those records: 24-8, 3-25. All they had to do was score runs and hold the other team to not scoring 4 runs, and they were going to win. Unfortunately, we had several blowouts and several low scoring losses. But overall, over the course of the season, I was pleased with the Mariners' ability to score runs and their ability to pitch. The bullpen was terrible, but the starting rotation was really, really solid. So, going to talk about some individual players now. Kyle Seager, he played 60 games, all 60 games, batted .241 with 9 homers and 40 RBIs. I can go into a bunch of other stats, but I don't see much use in going through all the stats. But overall, he had a really, really solid year. Impressive that he was able to keep doing what he's been doing as a Mariner his whole career here, consistent in the batter's box and on the field. Moving on to talk about Kyle Lewis, AL Rookie of the Year, .262 average, 11 home runs, 28 RBIs. He led American League rookies in many, many categories. His competition of Luis Robert played well, but fell off hard at the end. Kyle Lewis, he had his fair share of slumps, one kind of mid-season, and then end of the season struggled. But overall, he had a really solid year, and I'm excited to see how he does in the future. So then moving on to talk about Evan White. He struggled at the plate big time, but he still actually had 8 home runs and 26 RBIs. But overall, it was a struggle for him. He made the leap from AA to the MLB in one season. I'm hoping that we didn't screw his bat up by sending him up to the majors too early. I think he'll grow into his bat, but his defense makes up for it by a long shot. And he won a well-deserved Gold Glove award, so I'm really happy about that. Also, J.P. Crawford, he was average at the plate as well. I believe his average ended up being about 250, but he played amazing defense. The two of them were really, really good all year on the infield. And in general, with Seager at third and Dylan Moore, Tim Lopes, whoever was playing second base, Shed Long and D. Gordon were not amazing, but overall, the infield was really, really good all season. And speaking of Dylan Moore, he had a huge impact all over the field, utility player throughout the season, playing great in left field and right field, also playing some second base, and just he had a huge impact. When guys were hurt, he stepped in. If it weren't for him, I don't even know if we would have won as many games as we did. I mean, his WAR is not that high, but just in general, his ability to make a difference in the game was huge. Getting on to some of the disappointments, Shed Long, was a disappointment. I was never really high on him. I wasn't quite sure why we just decided to give him the second base starting job. He definitely had some weaknesses throughout the year. It was figured out later on that he had a stress fracture in his leg, I believe. So I'm sure that was tough to battle through. And I hope he's doing well this next season. But I just didn't see for long in our lineup. D. Gordon, he just got released, and he was definitely a disappointment his whole Mariners stay here, except for his first season. Malik Smith, huge disappointment. That trade with the Rays is pretty much a wash. I mean, Mike Zunino played well in the playoffs, but overall he hasn't done well over in Tampa Bay either. So that trade with Jake Fraley, who's also a disappointment for me. Jake Fraley just has not lived up to the hype from that trade. He was another disappointment. And then also want to touch on the trade deadline moves. I thought we brought in a lot of great talent. I like the San Diego move of trading Austin Nola. It was sad to see him go, but we caught a lot in return. Torrens and France are exciting young players, and it'll be cool to see how they develop in our system and become a part of this team. Moving on to talk about the pitching, Marco Gonzalez and Justice Sheffield were really good. I was wrong about Justice Sheffield. I did not think he was going to pan out. I thought that trade with for Paxton with the Yankees was going to be a bust, just like all of our other trades with the Yankees, if anyone remembers the Michael Pineda, Jesus Montero trade, and some other trades we've had with them. But Sheffield has impressed, and he had a great rookie season. I was happy to see that. Marco Gonzalez was consistent all year. Great to have atop the pitching staff. Ideally, he's not a number one starter, but hopefully we can get one of those soon. Justin Dunn, he was also impressive at limiting hits, but he had command issues, a lot of walks, so he wasn't giving up very many hits, but he was walking a lot of guys and not getting swing and miss stuff. It'll be interesting to see if he stays in the rotation. I think he might be an effective bullpen arm, possibly, with guys like Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and the other prospects we have in the ranks as far as starting pitchers go. It was sad to see Taiwan Walker leave. There's a chance maybe we can re-sign him, so I'm excited for that as well. Talking about the bullpen overall, that was probably the biggest disappointment of this season. There were only a few guys that stood out for me. Misevich, Joey Gerber, Johan Ramirez were all really solid the whole year. And then Kendall Graveman, once he went to the pen, he did pretty well. He was not effective as a starter, and he had health issues all year. But we did sign him back for next year, so he'll be in the bullpen. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get some bullpen guys in free agency and improve that pen, because I think if we could, we have a decent shot of making a run for the playoffs next year. And I know I sound hopeful with that, but there is a shot. So one other thing I wanted to look at was there were a few things that prevented us from making the playoffs in this shortened season. It was only 60 games, and every game was huge, and that was really evident. The game against the Padres, where we were up 7-3, I believe, in the last inning, Taylor Williams came in, gave up a couple runs, and was struggling quite a bit. And then Dan Altavilla came in and gave up like a 3-run homer, and we ended up losing that game. That's something that just cannot happen. You can't blow a lead that big in the last inning. And we only finished 2 games behind the Astros. That game made a difference. And then also going 0-4 against the San Francisco Giants. 2 of those games we lost 6-5. Were definitely winnable games, just blew a couple of leads. It was just unfortunate that we weren't able to get 1 or 2 more games, which would have made it interesting to see if we could have taken out the Astros. Hindsight is 2020, so you can't change the past and whatnot. Those few games did matter ultimately from us not making the playoffs this year. Overall, I'd say Mariners outperformed expectations, and they really do have a shot in 2021. And I'll be talking about that more when I do my free agency video and my preview for the offseason. But now I'm going to be switching over to talking about the review of my tier list and 2020 season for the rest of the MLB teams. So next I want to talk about my tier list video from the start of the video and kind of look at where I had teams and where I think they ended up. I'm not going to go through a full tier list again. I'm just going to give a quick commentary on each team. So starting off with the bad tier, the Baltimore Orioles. I would actually move them up to the below average tier. They surprised a lot of people early on. They were in the playoff race for a while and they kind of faded hard at the end. They had some interesting players in Anthony Santander, some other Pedro Severino, some other guys that performed well. Ryan Mountcastle came up and played well, but they're still waiting on Adley Rushman and some other their other key prospects to come up. So they're still kind of in that below average tier, but they definitely impressed early on. The Kansas City Royals, I honestly didn't pay very much attention to them most of the season. They were pretty, below average to that bad tier, so not much there to say. The Detroit Tigers, like the Orioles, they surprised early on. They had some injuries and a lot of, stuff going on. They ended up falling back to earth by the end of the season, but there were some promising performances from guys like Jeimer Candelario, Victor Reyes, and some other guys on their team. So the Tigers are heading in the right direction, but they're still kind of below average. Now, the Pittsburgh Pirates was probably the team that I was most right about. Nobody had them like, oh, the Pirates are going to be good, but they were probably, for most people, they were in that below average to group, but they were really, really bad, and they were definitely the worst team in all of baseball. Not much to look forward to as a Pirates fan for the next couple years. And lastly, in the bad tier, we have the San Francisco Giants, which I was very wrong about them. They pieced together a team that was what I would consider in the or even close to that good tier. They just missed out on the playoffs, kind of faltered at the end there, but they overall had a decent year. Moving on to my below average tier, the Miami Marlins. They surprised a lot of people and made the playoffs. I thought they were going to be okay. I didn't think they were going to be as bad as people were saying they were, but I also left them in that below average tier because I still thought they had a lot of room to grow and work. So it was good to see them make the playoffs, and it was exciting. They had a lot of interesting players like Miguel Rojas. It was a fun season to watch the Marlins, and Sixto Sanchez. It was fun to see him grow. The Marlins are going to be interesting in that NL East division in the next few years. Next, the Seattle Mariners. I had them in the below average tier, but I was also saying that people were underestimating them, and they definitely outperformed expectations. I don't need to go into everything as I've already talked about it at the start of this video with my overall review of the team, but they definitely outshined expectations. The Colorado Rockies, I would actually move them down into that bad tier. They started off kind of hot, and then they were terrible the rest of the year. Not much to look forward to. Again, for Rockies fans, they're struggling. There's talks about Arenado being traded, Trevor Story being traded, and it's going to be another rough set of years for the Rockies. Next up is the Red Sox. I was also very, very right about this team. A lot of people thought the Red Sox were still going to be in contention somewhat, but I was looking at that pitching staff and the injuries they had, losing Mookie Betts, and I was like, this is not a good team, and they were not a good team. I still don't think they'll be a good team next year, but I won't get into that too much. We'll see how free agency plays out. The Rangers, the last team in the below average team, they would move down into that very bad tier for me. They were awful. They started off okay. The pitching was fine, but the hitting was awful, and not much to look forward to, as it looks like the Rangers are going to be going into a rebuilding process. So moving up into that tier, the Phillies, didn't pay much attention to them. They were truly kind of an team. They just missed out on the playoffs by a game or two. Underperformed again. They've been underperforming for the past couple years. Next, going to talk about the Padres. They definitely outperformed my expectations. I thought they were going to be good, but I still thought they were, a couple pieces away from being a great playoff team. But they definitely surprised this year. So I thought they were going to be good, but I didn't think they were going to be as good as they were. And then moving on to the New York Mets, they stay in that tier. They underperformed, missed out on the playoffs by a couple games. DeGrom was great as always, but overall, Pete Alonso was a disappointment. There were some other guys that just didn't show up this season. The Chicago Cubs, by their record and winning the division, you could put them in the good or great tier. But for me, they stay in that tier because they lost to the Marlins in the playoffs. They won a division that was not very good. The NL Central was really bad, so the Cubs honestly were not an amazing team that got lucky with an easy schedule. The Cardinals, they had a rough road. Leave them in that tier for this 2020 season as they struggled through COVID stuff, and the offense was fine here and there, but it wasn't amazing. The Brewers, I would put them in the below average tier, but somehow they managed to scrape together some wins to make the playoffs. They had a great bullpen, an offense that was okay, pitching was pretty So overall, they're staying in that tier for me, but they also weren't very good, and I would consider putting them in the below average tier if they didn't make the playoffs. The Toronto Blue Jays, kind of similar to the Marlins, they surprised a little bit. I thought they were going to be good, but I also still thought they were a couple pieces away from the playoffs. But, similar to the Marlins, that extra playoff seed did help them out. So realistically, in a full season, I don't know if they get that wild card, but they did, and they definitely had a decent season. So we'll see where I put them for my 2021 season predictions. Moving on to the good tier, the White Sox. They were good, and I would leave them there. Their offense was amazing. The pitching was good at times. The bullpen was fine. Overall, just a good team. But there's still some improvements that they can make. So we'll see if they can step it up even more in the 2021 season. The Indians, their pitching was amazing. The offense struggled most of the season, got hot at the end to push them into the playoffs. Pitching kind of fell apart in that two-game series against the Yankees, and I would leave them in the good tier. The Diamondbacks were probably the team I was most wrong about, as they were really bad. I did not expect them to be as bad as they were. I thought they still had the pieces. They made some moves that the Diamondbacks have been making over these last few years that have helped them improve their club. They just weren't very good, and so that was a little disappointing. I would actually put them in that below average tier currently. The Oakland A's, they did well most of the year. I would actually probably move them up into that great tier as they had a good season. The Angels, I may have overvalued them a little bit, but I thought they got to push through at some point, right? But no, they were right there with the Mariners in that to below average tier. And we'll see about next year. The Tampa Bay Rays in that great tier, I would move them up to the World Series contenders. They had a great year all around, great performances both in the regular season and in the playoffs. I was rooting for them in the World Series. Didn't happen, but overall, it was still a fun World Series to watch, and they're a great team. Moving on to the Nationals, this team I was also wrong about in my tier list, but I didn't have a great feeling about them. Most people I think had them in, oh, they're going to be World Series contenders again. Looking at that lineup, I was like, yeah, they'll still be good, but overall not amazing still. But they were really bad. The offense, Trey Turner, Juan Soto, those guys were good, really good, but the pitching was terrible. Bullpen struggled, and overall the offense did not come through entirely. So the Nationals, they're going to be looking to improve their team this offseason as they would be in that to below average team. The Braves, I had them in the great tier just because I don't know. I just thought they're not there yet, and they kind of proved that with their pitching in the playoffs. Just couldn't make it through. They blew that 3-1 lead to the Dodgers, and overall it was just kind of a struggle for them. So that's kind of where I would put them in that great tier, and I keep them there. They had a good season, but just not enough. The Astros, honestly, they don't even really belong in that great tier. Probably I would switch them and the A's after the season's over. They were still good, barely made the playoffs. The Mariners, right on the heels of the Astros. To see what happens with the Astros, if they'll keep the team strong and continue to be a good team, or if things are going to fall apart this winter. So next up is the World Series contenders tier, with the Yankees starting that tier off. Did well, but they always seem to have a lot of injuries, and the pitching was just not enough for them to get over the hump. But they would still stay in that World Series contenders tier. The Twins were a big disappointment, actually, both the Twins and the Reds. Pitching was great and the offense was not, which it was weird because both of these teams had players like Nick Castellanos, you had Miguel Sano for the Twins. It's like you had power-packed lineups. Joey Votto, Nelson Cruz, back and forth. Both these teams had great lineups, but they just struggled heavily and ultimately just couldn't get it done on the offensive side, and it led to them having early exits in the playoffs, which is very disappointing because I liked both of these teams heading into the season. Then the Dodgers, the last team to look back on in this tier list. They were World Series contenders the whole year, had a great season, and ended up winning the World Series. Not much to say about them. They had a great year and they ended up winning it. So that's going to be the review of my tier list for the 2020 season. And overall, I don't think I missed on too many things. I definitely missed on the Nationals and the Diamondbacks in the upper tiers, and I would say I missed on the Padres in having them in the tier. I missed on the Marlins, maybe. I wouldn't necessarily say they were amazing. They might fall in that to good tier. But overall, I don't think I missed on too much. You know, it's opinion based. Some of you guys might not agree with me keeping the Cubs in that tier, but to be honest, I just don't think the Cubs are very good, and their outlook going forward is also not good with Theo Epstein stepping down, players possibly going to leave, and it's not looking great for the Cubs and their season. Although the record was fine, ultimately to me it was not a success. Wouldn't change much about my tier list. A few teams going up and down one tier. That's going to be my tier list. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.